This is Lynn Fraser with the Radical Recovery Summit. I'm really delighted today to be here with Dr. Charles Flores, and he is highly credentialed. He's a California licensed and nationally certified psychotherapist, a state and internationally certified advanced drug and alcohol counselor. He has a PhD at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and he's the new Psychedelics and Addictions Fellow for the Center for Psychedelic Therapies and Research. So that's a big part of the focus of our talk today, is to talk about psychedelics and treatment and how that's gotten to be such a fad in a way. And what is your perspective on how it's being westernized and maybe co-opted a little bit? But also I'd love to hear some of the real advantages of using plant medicine. So just however you'd like to start, where would you like to go from there?
I'll just say a couple of words about myself. That I'm originally from New York City and came out to California about 20 years ago. And in part, it was part of that journey was to do some exploration. Not that New York City is a pretty open place, but particularly the Bay Area of California, people are really experimenting with a lot of different things. And of course, everything has its positive and its negative. So but I wanted to see the positive side of that, and really being able to sort of hang out there a little bit more. And I think it can be tough for people that are in parts of the country where you don't have that freedom to express what's going on inside of you, what you want to explore. Many times it's spiritually or socially or whatever it is. So yeah, and I came out here, and it's been, as we were mentioning before, there've been some tough times with California and the fires and such. I've loved it in a lot of ways, and I've had the privilege to teach at departments at the former John F. Kennedy University, and right now I'm teaching at Cal State East Bay, and teaching drug and alcohol counselors how to do their work. And some of the courses I teach are regarding sexuality and addiction and spirituality and addiction. And that really dovetails a lot with this work that I'm doing as an addictions fellow, a psychedelics and addictions fellow. And so, yeah, it's a pretty big topic now. We're living in this psychedelic renaissance, and right now I see that there's another talk going on about the proliferation of psychedelic conferences all over the place, right? Because you wouldn't be able to go to all of them, except now it's Zoom, or it's all Zoom oriented. So you could go to conferences in other countries, and provided the time zone is workable for you.
That's a big advantage. That's a big advantage. Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge. So yeah, it's becoming more and more of a big buzzword, and moreover, it's really becoming it's going to be big business. So there's a lot of venture, or for some people /vulture capitalism, sort of like putting in billions of dollars toward the medicalization of certain plant medicines that are going to be scheduled in a different way by the FDA. Hopefully, the trials seem to be going straight ahead. So we're looking at a year or two. And so, all that investment is coming in now. And there are a number of us that have concerns about what that might mean and how that rolls out. And with the acknowledgement that investment is very important. Like we actually do need investment. It's not about like whether there should be any investment in this. There needs to be that. But it's about conscious and responsible investment and ethics and all those things. And then just the proliferation of psychedelics generally, like how that rolls out this time, and have we learned some of the lessons from the last time it rolled out, and what happened there, and what's going to happen now. And then really the topic today is also, where does that relate to addiction, which is an interesting topic. Yeah.
And we've seen with the, the legalization of marijuana. I live in Canada and it's legal across the country here. And big business came in, venture capital came in, and those little mom and pop shops kind of got lost in it. So I'm sure that there's lots of concerns about big money coming in, even though we need it and it's helpful for the research. It co-opts the whole process. So one of the things I wanted to address a little bit is we're talking about the drivers of addiction. I'd love to get your perspective on how you see this. And so for the Kilby Center, one of the big drivers is trauma, of course, and then that disconnection that happens with trauma. And it seems like with psychedelic and plant medicines, that same disconnection is happening from the spiritual plant medicine. Can you reflect on that a little bit? What's your thinking on that?
So if we went back in history and looked at the use of plants for these purposes, and there's many different theories about it. Some people believe that, or don't have a doubt that prehistoric peoples were eating things like magic mushrooms and having experiences, and that may have something to do with our evolution even. And Dennis McKenna promotes that. But in any case, peoples for thousands of years have been taking plants and for some form of shift of consciousness. So there's plants that are food, right? So and in a way we're taking that in, and we're taking in something that's in our bodies, and so we kind of look at that in one way, but all these different plants have different impacts and effects. There's a whole botanica of different kinds of plants that we're taking in. The difference is that many times first peoples, and our ancestors really saw themselves being embedded in a web of nature. It wasn't about sort of like what comes from more of the Judeo-Christian monotheistic culture where it's about dominion over nature. It's more that we are one with nature. We are part of nature. We're not separate from it. We are, creatures of nature. And in fact, these things are alive. They're living beings. So you have plants and animals, and even things that we say today scientifically or inanimate, for many people that had a life. There was a spirit even in rocks and places, right? There was the terms terrapsychological understanding of our relationship to our environment. And that psychology of place was very much, it was very implicit, right? It was a place where everybody was kind of in the same space with that. We're all living in this consciousness and this embeddedness to a certain degree. And then civilizations started, and then a lot of things started to gradually change. The consciousness started to change with that. And what I talk a lot about is like what happened in Europe and Western culture. First we had monotheism, which already started the ball rolling with domination of nature, and that nature is related to sin, perhaps in the Christian understanding, and it's a scary place. It's and then sort of casting people who were the shamans of Europe as witches, warlocks, right? So we start off already with the Christian tradition, and then it turned into, then we had the Renaissance, the humanism, the Enlightenment, all that, where it became like humans were now more empowered, more in the center of things. And what ended up happening is that, okay, the church didn't have dominion, but now we are all sort of acting on the same premise of dominion over nature, and that nature is there for us to take, and it's for our extraction and our use. And so I think those things are very much coordinated. When we talk about addiction and we talk about plant medicines, we're talking about the same process, because when you look at ancient peoples, other times, what you don't see is a lot of writings about alcoholism. You don't see a whole lot of people talking about being addicted. Oh, well, there were all these addicted slaves running around. Nobody was saying that. There was no sense of that, because they weren't taking plants for that reason. There were festivals for Bacchus, the god of wine, whatever, but that was a festival. They did that, and they drank a lot of it, And they did that, and then they continue to work because most humans were slaves, frankly, of
Right.
some form. So they weren't like getting drunk all the time and losing, because then they would probably get whipped and die. They would not be able to survive. So or they were warriors or whatever. People didn't want to be that. And moreover, we didn't have, most cultures, they had wine, they had other things, but we weren't doing things that we did in Europe later with distillation. So you're not making the wine into moonshine. You're not turning it into the spirits, right? And they're called spirits, right? They were, because it goes from an earlier use of the word spirits, right? You drink, and then you're having, and because it goes back to even ancient Greece, the Dionysian mysteries and substances that they took at the time that they knew about. So, and then you fast forward to the last 100 years, we've taken all these substances, whether it's poppy, turned it into, it's gone, evolved all the way to fentanyl. We had coca leaves, which turned into cocaine, then crack, and
Right.
all that. So the substances we had was all part of this distillation process, that
Right.
we've extracted something that was natural and people have been using for thousands of years. Maybe they have a few leaves in their mouths of
Mhm.
coca, or they use it for a headache,
Mhm.
becomes this massive, powerful substance. And we've done that with cannabis in the cannabis industry. We've seen that. It's ever more, ever stronger, ever more powerful cannabis. So in a way, that part has a lot to do with creating addiction, alcoholism. In my courses, I talk about the history of that. We don't see alcoholism even mentioned until the last couple of centuries.
Wow.
And then it's really in a Christian context in the United States and in North America, right? We're really looking at it, the temperance movement, and
Right.
being sinful. The males are not taking care of the family, and
Right.
they're having this inebriation problem. So in the past, we didn't really have the same kind of problem that we have today. And
Mm.
so the extraction process brought us in at one level, some of the addictions that we see. And I
Okay.
would argue that even one of the most prominent addictions we see, which is totally artificial, is the internet
Right.
addiction. Addiction to apps, addiction to porn, addiction to these things. This is all produced, human made.
Right.
There was no opportunity for anybody to be addicted to an iPhone or a Samsung or an Android. That didn't exist. So a lot of these things are sort of our creations, right? So we have that. And fast forward, we're looking at plant medicines, and plant medicines not just being, and all the plants, if you ask a shaman, they'll say they're all sacred. Coca leaves and poppy and all that, they would use that. That was a part of the understanding with nature. But then there were some plants that were special in some way that they might call master plant teachers. Right? So there were certain ones that had a certain kind of power to help shift and transform the consciousness in a certain way. It was very powerful. And it may vary depending on cultures, but I think very specifically, and we see a lot of the shamanistic cultures in South America, really, that's really where it's prominent. So that's where the psychedelics, the classic psychedelics that we know about, which are like ayahuasca and mushrooms, and wachuma, which is San Pedro, which is a cactus, peyote. These are, and then they use other substances that are also more mildly psychoactive, like cacao, which is chocolate. But there was a particular breed of chocolate that they would use for ceremonies, right? So it was like this powerful thing. And then Europeans, of course, made it into chocolate bars and chocolate cake and stuff, right? But basically, it was not used that way at all. So it was how we appropriated these substances that
Mm.
made a difference. And so now we come to the same issue, that we're once again coming to an extraction process. We're
Mhm.
coming into a place where, all right, embedded in the natural plant, as it grows, it has certain properties, it has certain things. And then what science tries to do is extract, okay, what are the main ingredients? How do we make them stronger? Or how
Right.
do we make them better? I went to one conference where they were literally talking about psychedelics 2.0. So in other
Oh,
words, we want to make it better than nature. We want to make it superior to it. And so we're going to
yeah.
invest a lot of money into that. Well, so it's that is really the challenge. And so from that level, we're looking at some of the same issues. If people were just taking coca leaves and a little poppy for some pain, we wouldn't be having that issue.
Right.
And the same thing, it's the relationship that we have to nature, that we take a medicine,
Right.
a pill, we take something and we just take it. There's no reciprocity. There's
Mhm.
no, we don't offer anything. We
Right.
take a pill and I want to change how I feel. And so then we take it every day, or we take it constantly. And that's the relationship that becomes addictive. It's like, I need to shift. I want to feel different. I want to have a different feeling. It's filling up something that is empty inside of me. So I need to take it all the time in order to feel the way I want to feel. Addiction for psychedelics, it looks a little different. It's less prevalent, at least, pharmacologically, we don't really see the same kind of addiction mostly. We see it
Mhm.
with ketamine, but like most of you're not seeing that, but there can be an addiction to experiences,
Right.
to have spiritual experiences, so like have fireworks and all that. And then there can be a little subculture that's whether it's in Canada or the United States or whatever in the West, where you have your little group and you're
Yeah.
taking medicines and you're doing kind of pseudo Aboriginal ceremonies and things, but mixed with a lot of other things. And so it creates its own little culture in and of itself, but it gets farther removed from, and so then people are attracted to that. They were like, oh, I just like, so it's a kind of getting high, but it's getting high on images and experiences and such.
So we seem to be, as human beings, we seem to be quite susceptible to, dopamine hits, and like our mammal bodies have certainly not evolved as quickly as our culture has evolved. But also we have this, like you said, we have this, we just take, but also we're so disconnected. Is it mostly prevalent that people would be using MDMA or psilocybin or the different plant medicines to have assisted therapy, like psychedelic assisted therapy, or is it more just like a drug culture getting high kind of a thing?
So in the United States, we're still in a process where there is a legal route for people to use these substances. Are people doing it for medicine? The only case where it's legal currently is ketamine. And so, for ketamine infusions, which are shorter doses, usually 90 minutes, and not all those clinics are doing it in a psychedelic dosage, right? So there a lot of places are doing, like the Veterans Administration, I believe, and Kaiser are usually doing a lower dosage for a treatment-resistant depression that's off-label, you know. So, but other clinics like the one I work with is doing higher doses. It's strongly suggested that you do, like, some ketamine-assisted psychotherapy with it. So in
Right.
other words, you're having experiences and then you're doing an integration process, much like you would with MDMA or psilocybin in the next couple of years, hopefully. So you'll be able to go to a clinic and do that. So the answer to the question really is that people aren't doing anything official. We do have a decriminalization movement,
Mhm.
where we have cities where anything that you can grow yourself from the
Oh,
nature and the land, it's still illegal, but it's becomes the lowest priority for
oh,
enforcement. So that's really where this. So in Oakland and many other cities around the country, we are seeing that, but that's for personal use. And yeah, so that's where we are here in the United States right now. And for many of these substances, you have to do it legally. You have to leave the country, or even go to Canada if you want to, say, for example, take iboga
mhm,
for your opiate addiction,
right.
right? So you go to a clinic up in Canada or in Mexico,
So what do you see? I think it would be interesting to just have you do kind of a rundown of the major psychedelic medicines that you see. And what would that kind of look like, say, maybe in 3 years, or once they're kind of regulated for use in clinics and people can have plant medicine assisted therapies? What do you see? What are the main ones?
There are the two substances that are currently in trial, right?
Mhm.
So we do see that, MDMA and psilocybin have gone through a lot of hoops already, and so they would be the soonest to actually be rescheduled. There is some work now really to focus, at least with psilocybin, on the working with psilocybin for addiction issues.
Mhm.
So, for example, Johns Hopkins University is currently, I think, in the third stage of a trial for smoking cessation. And
Oh,
that has been enormously successful, actually. We're seeing rates in the trial of success rates of 80%. So
wow.
these are people who are hardcore smokers with that intention, not to have a different meaning of life, or it's really they're doing it for that. And that's running right now more, about double what our best treatments that we currently provide with medicines like Chantix or Wellbutrin plus, gum and patches. So that already is really exciting. And there are some other universities that are also doing trials with alcohol and psilocybin and
Mhm.
other substances. So that's exciting, and I'm really happy to see that Johns Hopkins is really taking the lead on that particular front, because I think that sort of lays the ground out for the potential for ibogaine, or at least some version of ibogaine, because ibogaine has issues with the cardiac stuff, which right now needs to be screened, and it is successfully screened around the world. But
Right.
it would limit the usefulness for certain people who have heart conditions, right?
Right.
But it's very powerful, and it's life changing for a lot of folks. And for potentially down the line, I would say ayahuasca could be a possibility.
Mhm.
There are limitations with ayahuasca because of the international trade of ayahuasca. We really need to be sensitive to the fact that it's a jungle plant, and
Right.
um, right now there's a huge booming tourist industry with that. There's limitations. The Amazon jungle is really, as it's being set on fire, and there's so many issues going on with that. I would say maybe that's down the line, as a possibility. I'm currently writing a paper specifically on this, on like what
Uh,
promising substances that we're looking at for specifically for addictions. And
mhm.
right now, I'd say that the first thing up right now is psilocybin for
Mm.
sure. I think ketamine is already here in the United States. However, it's tricky. It has an addictive potential on its own, and it's also helpful for some people who have issues with alcoholism. It's kind of one of these, it's a very
Mm.
slippery kind of substance. People
Right.
definitely, it helps them detox, it helps them come to another place with that, with alcohol. And then, hey, there is also the potential and the beginning of some resumption of research into LSD.
Oh.
Yeah, so because there was some early research on that, and with all these kind of the classic psychedelics like LSD and all that, part of the challenge is that we're talking people are having long journeys. They're 6 to 8 hours often,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it requires a lot of concentrated effort for physician, nurse, psychotherapists, that sort of thing. So there, and you almost have to view it as an operation. It's like, okay, it's like even
Mhm.
if you were in a shamanistic ceremony, you're going for hours, and that's how
Right.
they viewed it. So not like an outpatient thing, like, oh, I'll just go in and then go home, after a few minutes. It's more like, okay, you want to exercise your demons and do some real work here, and we're gonna take some time to do this, and you're gonna take some time at home, you're going to integrate, we're gonna work with a therapist, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the plan, I think. immediately that we can foresee, but yeah, who knows?
Mhm.
It's like it's a tough thing. I know that MAPS has also really been promoting as the next stage ibogaine in the United States, and I think that would be really helpful here because we do have a huge epidemic of heroin use and opioid use, and iboga has a natural, it just hits those receptors. It does a great job with that. And that if we could do it all in one country, then it could be part of a more integrated system. Because right now people are going to, say, Canada, but then they have to come back to the United States to their environments and all that. And we don't
Right.
really have an integrated way to do that. They go for 5 days and then they're coming back to their environments, and sometimes therapists that don't know much about how to
Right.
work with it.
So I'm most familiar with using like ayahuasca and different medicines like that for trauma. So it helps to reduce resistance. People can, if they're using it therapeutically, people can have some real breakthroughs in their trauma and healing trauma. But it sounds like there's more to it. So it sounds like that's part of it, that it would need to be used therapeutically in order to have a long-term effect on addiction, because a lot of what drives addiction, of course, is trauma. But what else is going on in the use of plant medicine? Is there something else as well? Like people who are doing this for smoking cessation, are they doing
Mhm.
trauma therapy or are they just using the medicine?
I think there are a lot of causes for addiction, trauma being a very big prominent one, right? So that's something that we need to look at almost in every case as a potential for trauma and that separation. But there's already a separation. There's already a separation from ourselves and nature, from ourselves and our spiritual nature. That's why you have tomes of writings about existentialism, right? It's about you are alone in the universe,
Right.
your
Yeah.
own uniqueness, and it's a very different perspective than many of the mystical traditions that see our interconnectedness, right? And really see us as being one with things. It's kind of the opposite side of the coin, and it's about the limit of our Western mental capacities to really understand connectedness. We have to go to a different place in our consciousness to feel truly connected.
Mhm.
So I could argue that there, even if you didn't have something, a trauma that you couldn't point to,
Right.
there's some, oh, there's this thing that happened to me or that thing, um, just being born
Yeah.
in a westernized culture, you're already separated. There's already a large degree of separation that is just just kind of ingrained. And then that's why people love to go to other places where it's different or it's less so. They'll go to Bali or some other culture where
Right.
there's this deeper sense of woven connectedness between people, and
Mhm.
they love it because they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was possible, that we could have this kind of sense of belonging and a sense of connectedness. And many times people feel that, and certainly, for example, with MDMA, they may have experiences like that where they're like, oh my gosh, I feel the connectedness to nature, or I feel the connect. And so those are like peak experiences for them. But actually, it's our birthright. So it's like the primal trauma is sort of being like unleashed, and you're, oh yeah, actually I'm a part of the
Right.
world, and the world is supporting me. It's
Mm.
I'm not, I don't need to be like, it's not the world is out to get me. It's actually pronoic instead of paranoid. It's actually the world is there supporting me at every step, and I just haven't seen that because the way I see the world has been skewed.
I know you do a lot of work around internet and porn addiction as well. So these behavioral addictions, process addictions. So do you feel like they act kind of the same way in terms of our brain and hormones as the chemicals do, or
Yes. Oh, for sure. It's intentional, right? So this is unfortunately the shadow side of psychology. You have psychologists that are working on, who have worked with these large companies to learn how to trigger that, because as like Tristan Harris of the Center for Humane Technologies talks about constantly, this virtual world is set up for the attention economy. It's basically all these players vying for your attention. And so then they set up the world itself so that it's like what actually gets your attention, what actually allows you to get another click. So and those things are monetized. So whether it's, and we have our own natural drivers, let's say for sexuality or for excitement or for wanting to be loved. So we're waiting for those likes and we're waiting for those thumbs up and the hearts, virtual hearts. And this is once again, like we get caught in that. And now young people are constantly with their phones, right? Like this, constantly looking at their phones, and their brains are being habituated to the constant flood of chemicals. And and there's a social pecking order within certain age groups, and how many likes and how many it's how many followers you have is an integral part of that. So that's just regular life. And I've seen people describe what it is to have been a 12-year-old 20 years ago as opposed to today. And there's so much more smartphone. There were no smartphones pretty much 20 years ago. So if you dealt with your humiliation at school, it was just you and the bully and whatever. Now everyone's got their phones out. And then they rebroadcast it over and over again on YouTube or whatever, Snapchat. And so it's just a whole nother thing. And now we're in COVID where it's completely virtual. Even the teaching itself is virtual. So that's like the FDA has to approve the psychedelics and other drugs. There's no FDA for any of this technology. We get the iPhone 12 now, and there's no testing to see the long-term impacts and effects on the brain or to your children. There's no parental advisory. There's nothing. It's just like, and the parent is overwhelmed, and then they're like, oh, here, I want to play a game, and they play a game. They go on their phone, they grab mommy's phone, or they have their own phone, or they're brought up with a phone, And then you have sexuality, put that into play, or other motivators, virtual gambling. I deal with a lot of gamblers. So coming back to what we're talking about, this is also a virtual world where, once again, another level removed from nature.
Even more separated.
We are even more separated. When someone is looking at porn, it's all their visual cortex, it's all imagination.
Right.
It is nothing to do with connection and intimacy with another human being. You're doing this in lieu of that for a certain kind of gratification, right? I've had clients who are addicted to various websites, not just porn, like there's porn websites, there are apps for hookups, so they can meet somebody and, oh, well, there's somebody who wants to have sex 20 feet away. Okay, great. We find a bathroom, we go and do that, right? There's that. There's also video games, huge multi-billion-dollar business. People get lost in the video games. They play it out. They're in whole virtual worlds. Then there's commodification within the video game. So there's like real money being involved. You have to buy treasures and you have to buy things. It's a huge topic in and of itself. And so we're all getting habituated to some form of addiction. And it does come back to, for me, the separation with what is real and what is true within us. Everything becomes outward focused rather than looking within. And where I get excited is when certain technologies can help us go the other direction, right? So then there's some technologies like certain kinds of neurobiofeedback, for example. Like years ago, there was the video game, The Wild Divine.
Right, yeah, I had that.
Right? So it's like, okay, learning how to control your breath and to meditate. So, and then you meet Deepak Chopra as your highest level or whatever. Okay, fine. It's not the Buddha exactly, but it's fine. It'll work. but there's still a lot of interesting tech that is, the Muse
Yeah.
headband for meditation. There's many things. I Awake technologies for listening to help people meditate, and there's a lot of other things, wearables. So that is at least going in the other direction, but the flood of it is all in the addictive and in a separative kind of way.
So can we go a little bit more into porn addiction? So when you're talking about we're habituating brains, so when I think about porn addiction, I mostly think about men. I'm sure there's some for women too, but it's mostly boys and men. The adult men is one thing, but boys is another. And there's an inherent objectification of women, usually in pornography. But also there's such a shame. Can you talk a little bit about the shame element and the disconnection? And like, is it really harmful for boys to be doing that? Is it something that they will grow out of and that they'll still be okay? They'll be able to have intimate relationships with real people?
As human beings, we're very resilient. Many of us have come up through less than ideal circumstances, and we find our way one
Mhm.
way or the other. Pornography is a large chunk of what is the internet, so amazingly, and it's like this huge, global business. And what that does to the brain, I think, is still, the jury is out. Clearly, there's a lot that is being objectified there. We had objectification before there
Yeah.
was an internet, and there was Playboy, and there was other Penthouse, and there were other things but those were things that you had to like work hard to get. Now it's just so much easier. You can almost go anywhere to do that. I would tend to think that, and this would require a lot more study to understand. And, the internet is something that's constantly evolving. So I think these kind of long-term studies have to be done to understand like what impact that pornography is having on younger people, and seeing what does that do to their relationship with people they're attracted with, connecting with folks. I think that in general, we see the internet is a form of separation. Many of us, when we've worked in addictions for a long time, we talk about arrested development.
Hmm.
So, the time that you start using a drug
Right.
and using it heavily is kind of like the time of your development that you're stuck in.
Yeah.
So if
Mhm.
you started when you were 15, then you, in a lot of ways, you maybe have a 15-year-old level of maturation
Right.
emotionally.
Yeah.
And so then you're kind of stuck there. And I think that that's maybe one good way to sort of view some of this. The degree that you're sort of inundated with porn is you're spending time doing that, and you're not learning how to negotiate relationships
Mhm.
with people.
Right.
There's a loss there,
Yeah.
where if you were at another time, then you'd have to learn how to do that, learn how to
Mhm.
ask someone out for the prom, or whatever it is that these
Yeah.
stages that you go through. So I think there's something definitely there. But I know people who have, they do porn and they have relationships, but it has in many ways a negative relationship, a negative impact on their relation. So
Mm.
many times the people who come to see me, and yes, they're mostly men, they're concerned because they're not feeling. They have this with the porn. It gets, it escalates. There's this sort of
Right.
like visual thing, and then so when they're actually with someone, it's not as, it doesn't stimulate them the same way. So they get habituated. That part of their brain gets habituated to a certain thing, and they
Mhm.
literally have to learn from scratch to remove themselves from one thing into another.
I work more with women, so what I see from that is more the feeling of shame and not good enough and not being desirable from that side. Yeah, which is hard.
Yeah,
It's hard for everybody.
it's hard. I think for men, it can come out in issues around quote performance, right?
Um,
Air quotes. So, it's like if they're looking at porn, then they feel like they can, and that they're with somebody and it doesn't look like the porn, then it becomes an issue. So then they can have low self-esteem around in that way, but not usually about, like, you may probably what you're referring to as body image, because the beautiful women and they'll have to look a certain way, and so by
right.
comparison,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and real women aren't porn stars, you know?
Correct.
Not what we are.
Even porn stars are not porn stars. They
Exactly.
they do all kinds of things digitally.
Yeah, true. Yeah. If you had a chance to kind of leave something with people, so people are suffering so much, there's so much disconnection. Some people are pursuing spiritual experiences, some through gurus, some through plant medicine. Where are we with addiction, and where is there hope for us? What's your take on that?
Oh wow, what a big
That's
question.
a big
It's like,
question.
so what's my, yeah. Um I watch a lot of Gabor Mate when he gets these questions, and when he says, like, sometimes I don't know. I have some ideas, but here's some
Don't ask
thoughts
me to
about
predict
it.
this future.
Right. Right. So, but yeah, so is there hope? That's the easy question. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's absolutely hope. I've seen it over and over again. There's definitely hope for people with addictions. So that's not, to me, I can say that unequivocally. But
Mhm.
what, part of this is, I think, is, and this is something I talk a bit about with students. I say, there's a big difference between abstinence or not doing a particular behavior and what we would call recovery.
Right.
Recovery meaning that basically, your recovery is a growth process.
Mhm.
It's something that's larger, and for some people, and look, I'm a harm reductionist. I'm going to be speaking on a harm reduction panel in a moment, and so I see where, it's a spectrum. There's no one size fits all for everybody, right? But recovery is really the sense that, that we were born in a situation where there were a lot of pieces missing.
Mhm.
There's a lot of disconnection right here in the world,
Yeah.
and then we add on top of it the trauma that we have,
Right.
and then the desire that so many of us have to not feel lonely, to fill up something with a substance or a behavior that gives us a different feeling,
Mhm.
or an experience of power, an experience of being held, experience. So we go for these artificial means to do that. Those instincts and those desires are totally part of what make us human.
Right.
It's they're not wrong. It's not wrong to want to belong. It's not wrong to feel like you have efficacy in the world. It's not wrong, but we're going about it in a dysfunctional way, in a way that doesn't really serve us, in a way that actually has a lot of harm for ourselves and others,
Right.
whether or not we recognize it. Sometimes the harms can be more subtle for someone who is addicted but functional,
Right.
right? So they've got a nice job or whatever, and they're holding the job, they're doing that, but actually there's some issues there. But they're not, living in a tent under the highway. They're not doing that, right? So where is the hope? The hope really comes in the understanding that we can, because our nature is not to be addicted. Our nature is not to be enslaved to a substance or any particular action. These are things that we get caught in. They're not things that are a part of who we truly are. Who we
Mm.
truly are is free.
Right.
And so then and I know with your work, and there's many ways of coming at it, it's to decondition some
Mhm.
of these beliefs, some of these attitudes. And it sucks that you have to be born in a world and then get deconditioned after you've been conditioned. you know, you got to kind of like
True though.
rework everything. It's like go to a teacher or go to, have these experiences, right? But that unfortunately is the process, because it's the way the civilization is set up so far.
Mhm.
And we don't know what's going to go on with this civilization, the way things are going. There's a lot of crises and things happening. So we need to, in a sense, wake up
Yeah.
to our our true nature,
Nature.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And I say on my website, which comes out of the integral recovery, I run Vital Puma Integral Recovery. It's wake up, then there's grow up,
Mm-hmm.
there is clean up, which is cleaning up the shadow material, and then show up. So it's wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. And that's the process of recovery. And in that process, we who are sleepwalking through life, we who feel disconnected with everything, we who are locked in our traumas or locked in create a new problem with a substance, and we're locked into the substance, the
Mm-hmm.
dependence on the substance, we can begin to free ourselves and become alive again. So
Right.
that we're no longer sleepwalkers, we're actually living more and more alive and more consciously. And what we see is in 12-step meetings and many other places, people who are alive, they're woken up, they're
Right.
lit up.
Yeah.
They feel like, wow, my God, I have gratitude for the life I'm given. I feel a degree of freedom of my potential. I can start to live the truth of who I am
Right.
and give to the world, not just take.
Right.
That I can provide and light up other people
Mm-hmm.
in recovery,
Yeah.
support others in that. And so when people are, those of us who are in recovery, you can recognize. It's like,
Sure.
yes, oh yes, you know what we're talking about, because there's a kind of an awakeness and a humility that comes from, I've made my share of mistakes, that's for sure, but I'm doing my work. I'm cleaning up, that stuff. And I need to grow. I want to grow up and become more wise and more compassionate, and show up so that every day I can do that. And this is where spirituality a lot of times can be really helpful. People are finding, whether it's through psychedelic insights or more sustained kinds of insights, which come with inquiry, through
Right.
meditation practices, through all these things where we're doing our work on a regular basis, that it's a different kind of life, and actually connecting with nature. I think that's
Yeah.
also a big part of it, that we're not just, even under COVID, I make sure that I get out and I get out on my bike, so I'm not exposing or getting
Yeah.
exposed to anybody, but I'm in with some trees and the air and it can be difficult here in California where there's
Yeah.
fires sometimes,
Yeah.
where it's smoky, but when it's, but I think all that is just so important. So I think it's that awake, alive nature. And when we I'm so big on this in emancipation, this freedom
Mm.
from that. And freedom runs all the way, not just with drugs and alcohol, but like spiritually, inwardly,
Right.
in the deepest sense. So there's a total compatibility I see
Yeah.
between all those different levels. And anyway, psychedelics, the top part of the topic, is one way that people can start to open up to that possibility. And it has opened up hundreds, thousands of people to a different kind of life, including someone like Bill W., who founded 12-Step, right?
Right.
He that's part of how he connected to higher power, and he
Mm-hmm.
also promoted LSD therapies. So,
Yeah.
I think it's important.
One thing that I wanted to just circle back to is, you said psychedelic medicines often will open us up to something that's already here. So that sense of oneness and sense of connection, that's already inherent in us. So we don't have to find that somewhere outside of us. But sometimes this plant medicine can help us to access that wholeness that's already here. And I think that's such a positive message,
Yes.
is that we're always already whole. And then we have these things that kind of are in the way, and distractions and trauma and things, but that inherently we're whole. So then we can come back to that. That's a beautiful way to.
Yeah, and the word also that came to mind after you said that is really, and it seems trite, because the human potential, like we have possibilities to go beyond what we see.
Yeah.
And the cynic and the skeptic would say, oh my God, it's the way we've always been, the world's a mess, et cetera, et cetera. Oh my God, people are so selfish. all that. Well, that's in the culture, that's in economics, we're
Right.
self-seeking, self-interested, all that.
Right.
But no, we can cultivate positive values. This
Yeah.
is not only and it is a part of us. It is a part of our inherent
Mhm.
nature.
Right.
And we need to move some of the things that get in the way.
Well, thank you so much. This has been fun and interesting. And thanks for coming on the summit.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for inviting me.